In this lesson, we'll look at some techniques that will make you faster at navigating the information that's in your workbooks, and it'll also make you faster at finding and replacing information. So it'll just help you with your efficiency when you're working with your Excel notebooks. So we're looking at this topic right here, navigating in worksheets and workbooks, and I'll actually start in this list of objectives here at inserting and removing hyperlinks. So I'll start over here in the Excel Like a Boss sandbox. And let's take the 2018 goal leaders and say, like, I was trying to compare the goal leaders with the overall number of goals that were scored by a team. Let's just see what percentage of goals. So we're imagining that kind of scenario. So it may help me to create a hyperlink. And so this is, of course, is the thing that's going to make you faster and is going to be the testable type of skill that you might be asked about. So to insert a hyperlink, it's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is go to the Insert tab of the ribbon and insert a link. You can also, of course, right-click and choose Link. In either case, if you choose the arrow, either the drop-down arrow here or the arrow here, it'll just bring you a list of recently accessed documents. But I want to show you the dialog box. And you get to link to either an existing file or web page or a place in the document, create a new document, or you can even link to an email address. A web page is straightforward. You would type in the web page here, so you could type in something like that should be sufficient, or of course you can copy and paste information from a web browser. I'm going to navigate to a place in this document to complete the scenario, and I'm going to complete this by adding a named range. So these are defined names here. So I'll choose LA Galaxy, which I've previously set up, and I'll show you how to do this in just a moment. So I'm going to click on OK, and now it changes that entry into a hyperlink, and you can click and it'll take you to the named range, which brings us to our discussion of this, navigating to a named cell or a range. So up here in the upper left-hand side is the name box. And if you haven't already, if you skipped over the lesson on the Excel anatomy and you don't know what I'm talking about here, then I advise you to stop the tape here and go back and watch that basic tour of the Excel interface. But this is your named range list right here, and you can see that I've got 4 that have been defined. And to define a name range, you make a selection of cells. It doesn't really matter what selection you make, because you can select one cell or many cells, and then you could give that selection a right click and you can define the name. Now the other place to do this is from the Formulas tab of the ribbon. So it's a little non-intuitive about where this might be, but it is in fact the Formulas tab. So we'll click on Define Name. It brings up this dialog box. It'll give you a suggested name. You can't have spaces in your named range, otherwise it will tell you to stop using a space. But underscores are fine. It can even start with an underscore. And the pro tip is that if anything is started with an underscore, it puts it at the top of the list. So you can see here that I can use this list to navigate to certain areas of my spreadsheet, or I could navigate to certain areas of the workbook. And I'll show you that here as we click on Eastern Goal Differential. So it just gives me that named range right there. If I click on this named range, 2018 average, watch what happens. It'll take me to a different tab, and it has this range selected. Now, if you want to manage your list of named ranges, what you have to do is use the Define Names grouping and use the Name Manager. So if you're done using something like LA Galaxy, you can select it and delete. Of course, you can define new name ranges here and edit existing ranges. So I'm going to delete this one. You sure you want to delete? Click on OK, and then you can see the effect here in the drop-down. That thing is no longer listed. Once that's done, I'm going to navigate back to the MLS Standings tab and then click in the drop-down, and you see that one of those name ranges is no longer there. One last thing about the named ranges is this. When you are creating the named ranges, the scope is going to either be the workbook or a specific tab if you have different tabs of the workbook, if you have different worksheets in that workbook. The default is workbook, which means that the range will be selectable no matter what worksheet you're on. But if you limit the scope to just a worksheet, then what you may encounter is something like this. So on this tab, the attendance tab, it looks like we have fewer ranges, but in fact, one of the ranges that I've set up is limited just to this worksheet. So I can only select it when I'm on this worksheet. So the last thing we'll look at as we navigate in our worksheets and workbooks is that we will search for data within a workbook. Now this should be pretty straightforward here if you've used other Office applications. This is just essentially asking you if you know about the find and replace feature. So I'll go back up here to cell A1 in the MLS standings, and I'll bring up find and replace by doing Control F on the keyboard. And now that I've pressed Control F on the keyboard, it brings up find and replace dialog here. And so now I'm just being asked, what do I want to find, and do I want to replace what I find with other information? So I'll use this to find the letters FC. And if you're not seeing these items up here, then make sure that your options button is selected, because this will be the most testable item when it comes to finding and replacing. Are you searching within the sheet, or are you looking across the entire workbook? Are you searching by rows or by columns? Usually that's not that important a distinction. This can be a little bit more precise if you're trying to match entire cell contents. But that's not what we're going to do right here. What we're going to do is just simply type in FC and find next. So now it spots the NYC FC. If I change this to columns and find next, it really doesn't matter in this instance here because I'm just looking for a text string FC. So if I want to replace FC with football club, of course, I type in something like that, replace all, and then all of the instances of FC will be replaced with football club. So as you can see, I've replaced FC with football club there, and then a couple instances down here, football club at Dallas and LA football club. So I will now undo that to show you the last thing you need to be aware of for testing purposes, and of course this will make you more efficient when you're working with Excel. Go to the Home tab, and on the right-hand side of the Home tab are your editing collection of tools. And I would know about this drop down here, Find and Select. So obviously Find and Replace is what we've just gone over with the Control F and Control H. But you also have the ability to use the Go To, so that's Control G on the keyboard, and you can go to a named range, as you can see here, or you can click Go to Special, and now you'll be able to select from this radio button dialog box, and you can search for you can go to just places where you have formulas, objects, notes, blanks, and so on. So that's what's meant when it's asking you to be able to navigate to a workbook element. So for example, if this is selected, just this cell F7 is selected with the data in at 8 in the formula bar, and I go to Special and I try to find the formulas in my workbook, then it takes me to this column right here, which also is a named range, but if I look at any of the cells in this column, I can see that this was put together by doing a formula. It wasn't typed in information. It's a calculation that's being done within the spreadsheet.